Shelley, welcome back to another segment in our Contractor Liability Insurance series.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to be here, Jim.
Well, I thought in this segment we could talk about the specific Washington laws that impact construction per se.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one was maybe we were going to talk about RCW 1827, which I think is the contractor registration laws. It sounds like Washington has some specific requirements in that area.
Right. So most of the contractors just know they have to be registered. It's actually not even a license in Washington. People call it that, but it's actually a registration. So contractor registration law. They don't know that that's in there, and they don't know what constitutes the definition of a contractor, which is always so interesting to me. So it's a really good idea to read that law, but it says that anybody that contracts or purports to contract, which includes providing services to another party on their property, doing any kind of, and it lists out, I don't remember them off the top of my head, but improvements, so forth, on their property, which encompasses everything but pretty much handyman work, then they must be registered as a contractor, and that they must carry liability insurance and a bond, a license bond. Okay. Ironically, because it's a registration, but it is a license bond. And what that is a protection for the consumer. So it's a $12,000 for a general contractor, and $6,000 for a specialty contractor. And that's a bond that is placed with L&I. So you get your registration from Labor and Industries. They have to have that bond for whichever. If you are a specialty contractor, then that limits you to the one or two trades that you put on your application. And then a general contractor can do any trades and hire subs. So with that, then the idea is that the consumer then knows that you are in fact insured and have a bond. So if you don't perform your work, they have a recourse to go through L&I and do a lawsuit against you to get their money back, or whatever their grievance is, right? Mostly it's that you didn't show up to complete the work. That's the most common thing that we see. Okay. Or they don't like your work. Usually that's about them running out of money and not wanting to pay the contractor. So then they say, oh, it's a construction defect. And then it goes against the bond and whatever, and then liens. Okay. So you then have the state minimum liability insurance requirements, which I believe off the top of my head is $100,000 injury and $25,000 property damage, or something really ridiculously low. Yeah. And we don't even sell insurance in those limits. That's why I don't remember them specifically. It's some crazy low amount. The lowest amount that really anybody sells anymore is $300,000, then $500,000, and $1 million. I don't sell less than $1 million. The base premium mark is $300,000. And so when if we're clearing a subcontractor cert for a general and we tell them, oh, you have to have $1 million, and they're at $500,000, they automatically think, oh, that's too much. It's going to be double, when really it's only a 4 to 6% increase, because the bulk of it's at $300,000. So $1 million, which, isn't go very far in today's world. Yeah. So it's meant to be a consumer protection, that those things are in place for them. And if you get caught working without those things, you start running into some pretty stiff penalties and things, which are all outlined in the laws. So,
well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is absolutely zero training required to do any of this.
Right.
In our state.
Right. Pretty much if you have a pulse and $100 and something bucks, you can be registered as a contractor. Yeah, it's very sad.
It's kind of scary.
It's not quite that easy, because you actually have to buy insurance and a bond. So you'd have to qualify credit wise for the bond, and then, for the insurance, but it's still pretty easy. Okay. You can buy a terrible policy and a cracked junk bond and be fine. But within that, then it talks about different things. And one of the things that gets missed quite often, and I know we're going to hopefully talk about this further in the session, but is construction managers are required to have a general contractor's license. And they don't realize that. So they go out and they're selling themselves. I'm a construction manager. And really,
like a consultant of some
sort. Yeah. And that's a really slippery slope. That could be anything. Are they managing your subs for you? Are they managing the project itself for you in a superintendent role? What does that actually mean? Okay. But if they're out there managing the project from a superintendent standpoint, they need a general contractor's license. Okay. So that's right in the law. I don't know how many times I've sent that out, highlighted it. It's right here. Yeah. So they registration. Yeah, here we go. I'm doing it too. Well, that's how everybody says it. So
totally.
Used to it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Could you talk about the statute of repose? Is that how you
Repose,
termed
yes.
it? Okay.
Yeah, and
What is
that's
that all about?
that's a time clock for which you can be sued, and it's 6 years in Washington. And I just looked up before we started this because I remembered one state was 20, and that's Maine. Don't build in Maine.
Wow.
Right?
So in that case,
Most are
if,
10.
If you were selling insurance to a contractor in that state, would you keep their insurance going for 20 years after they're retired?
If you could, it's a occurrence-based policy, but it'd be a pretty unlikely that something's going to come up that long. I mean, most of the claims do come, well, it is tied somewhat to that number because it's a time clock. It's a stopwatch of when you can file a claim, and the attorneys know it. It's from substantial completion. And so that's when it could have been put to its intended use, not from the sale date. So it'll start tolling if it's sitting for sale. So that is good news. And that's different by state too. So you have to know your specific state law if you are out of Washington. Problem is we have a short one, but we have some of our other laws are stricter than most states by a long ways. We are really one of the most consumer-friendly states. It's definitely hard to do business in Washington as a contractor because you literally have to be perfect.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think the next one you wanted to touch on was the indemnity law related to construction.
Right. So there is a general indemnity law that's used in contracts, and then there is a special indemnity law for construction. The construction indemnity is very important. It's very specific, and it talks about you cannot transfer your sole negligence downstream, so from GC to subcontractor, and that the downstream, being the subcontractor, can only be held liable to the extent of their negligence. Okay. So then when you read those hold harmless and indemnification contracts, that's basically exactly what it says. Like when I read it, I literally took it from the law, and it says in indemnity, indemnitor in the law, and I replaced it with general contractor and subcontractor. If it says exactly what the law says, how can you get in trouble, right? So along with that in the contract is the subcontractor has waived all their rights and immunities under the RCW Title 51. So that talks about where you can't sue your employer, and then them being able to remove themselves, say, out of an action over claim. So they aren't able to do that. That they will be held liable then via the subcontractor agreement by the general contractor to be indemnified, and they can't take that immunity that they would have received otherwise.
Okay. Shelley, thank you so much for being part of this contractor liability insurance series. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Jim, really. Loved it.